What are the stories our mothers have withheld from us so that we wouldn't have to feel their pain? And are there areas in your life where you may be unknowingly carrying this burden while mistaking it for your own? As children of immigrants, many of us may not have grown up with hugs or kisses or hearing the words, "I love you." And in my household, love was often expressed in the kitchen as if every basil leaf and chili pepper was a joyful ancestor whose seeds planted new memories for us to create. And there was always enough food left over for the loved ones we imagined sitting beside us at the dinner table. Since then, I've learned to see cooking as a ritual, even if I've been guilty of buying red curry in a bottle from Trader Joe's. And it is not the same. And while I didn't fulfill my parents' American dreams of me becoming a nurse or a doctor, I'd like to believe that we are the descendants of healers who are reawakening to our gifts despite the generations we've been removed from our ancestral lineage. We are all being called to remember that healing goes beyond hospital visits and sage bundles or crystals, but is about transmuting the suffering of our past into joy and pleasure, even if it means literally going to the root of it and allowing the work we are doing on ourselves to ripple out to all those around us. It's why my generation is feeling this pull to return, including to countries like Ghana that have recently opened their doors to welcome those of the African diaspora back home. And while everyone doesn't have the means of returning to their roots, whether it be due to displacement, immigration, finances, adoption, and other barriers, we are still finding ways to reconnect. From our deep belly breaths to laughter over shared meals, and even the creation of altars in our living space as the place to return to whenever we forget that we are never alone because our ancestors are guiding the way, as long as we are putting in the work to meet them at least halfway. My belief is that the more we take this time to cultivate a relationship with our ancestors, this would prevent so much suffering in the world. Because violence is often bred from those who lack a sense of spiritual security, so feel this need to claim someone else's territory as their own, such as the brutal history of colonization. Our practice must also include that we in this room are currently on occupied, stolen land of the Tongva people, because ancestors are not just of our bloodline either. Also, who are those of your cultural lineage who gave you the confidence to be you, who used their voice and spoke up in the face of injustice in a time where it was safest to remain silent out of fear of persecution for their identity, their gender, and beliefs? My ancestors include leaders like Yuri Kochiyama and Grace Lee Boggs, who taught me I don't have to be quiet and obedient, but I can be a loud, unfiltered, and unapologetic Asian American. Because our ancestors are those who we choose and strive to embody. So celebrate the ones to come, including the ancestors you are becoming. And while many people may believe in reincarnation, like myself, this doesn't give anyone the right to claim someone else's culture as their own, just because you may think you were Native American in your past life. Being born in this body means we get to excavate the narratives that have informed our current power and place in the world, while creating new stories of hope, resilience, and possibilities for the next generation without ignoring or spiritually bypassing the trauma it took to get here. So sit with that discomfort, including the noise that may make you believe you don't know what you're doing, and ask yourself in moments of doubt, what would I say as a future ancestor? Because after all, we are the ancestors we have been praying to reconnect with.
Listen closely. The division between federally recognized and non-federally recognized tribes is not an accident. It's a weapon, a colonial strategy designed to keep us fragmented, to turn us against each other, seeking validation from systems that were never meant to protect us. This separation is no different than the many other tools of oppression forced upon us from the early days of invasion to the present. By allowing ourselves to be divided based on the approval of foreign, non-indigenous powers, we are playing into the hands of colonizers who would rather see us fight amongst ourselves than stand together. When someone tells an indigenous person that they don't exist because they lack federal or state recognition from a European settler or their government, they are upholding the very system that was created to erase us. These roles, the dolls, bakers, and others, is playing into the hands of the colonizers. These roles, devised by foreign powers, were never meant to protect us. They were designed to divide and rule. Those who enforce these standards become agents of colonial oppression. Let me say that again. Those who enforce these standards become agents of colonial oppression, attacking the very fabric of indigenous unity because they were never meant to reflect who we were and who we are, but rather to limit us, to contain us, to box us in. And those who cling to these documents as proof of someone's identity are carrying out the colonizers' dirty work, whether they realize it or not. This obsession with European standards of appearance or phenotype, this idea that there's only one uniform way to look indigenous, is a sickness that was never ours to begin with, reflecting a mind still imprisoned by colonial thinking. Before the invaders came, our ancestors didn't measure each other by skin tone, by hair texture, or by the shape of their noses. We mixed freely and naturally without the shackles of racial purity that the colonizers brought with them to our lands. Now, some of us have become experts at policing one another's identities, mimicking the very systems that were designed to erase us. When you insist that someone must fit into a certain racial box to be considered indigenous, you are repeating the genocidal logic of the oppressor. Do you get that? Every time we label each other, every time we divide ourselves based on colonial ideas of blood or appearance, we are chipping away at our own survival. We are feeding the very machine that seeks to erase us, that has always sought to wipe us out. We have existed for countless generations, long before colonialism introduced its poison. Our ancestors didn't see the world through the lens of race or purity. We have always mixed, not out of necessity, but because it was natural. Racism was not part of our worldview until the colonial invaders forced it upon us. I've seen how the darkest among us are forced to explain themselves with Afro, black, dark skin, etc., as if their heritage needs a disclaimer, while those with lighter skin are allowed to simply just be indigenous. This is the height of foolishness. The notion of full-blood indigenous person is a colonial myth, a fantasy designed to pit us against one another. Our histories, our migrations, our very existence makes such an idea impossible. The question, how much native blood do you have? This question betrays a deep ignorance of who we were and who we are. One indigenous ancestor is a gateway to millions more. Our bloodlines are endless, stretching back through time in ways that colonial thinking could never comprehend. Yet still, too many cling to this colonial drug, seeking European approval, while the truth of our existence slips through their fingers. To insist that someone must fit into a specific racial category or phenotype to be recognized as indigenous is to echo the genocidal thinking of the colonizers. When you engage in labeling, you are participating in our own cultural destruction, spreading the very ideology that seeks to erase us. It's equally absurd to deny our relatives from Central and South America or the islands, such as the Taino, the Garifuna, the Kalinago, and the Maroons of Accompong, their right to be indigenous, just because they don't fit a European-approved narrative. Our ancestors moved across this entire continent, north and south, and across the seas. Their blood runs through all of us. My people are tied to this land, and those ties extend across continents and across oceans. We are not limited to one region or one look. We never were. Today, we have some groups appropriating the legacy of the Olmecs, while others, especially with those of European ancestry, obsessing over blood quantum, spinning stories of Cherokee princesses. And then there's the Afrocentrics, who shame darker-skinned indigenous people, insisting that they are African. Yes, humanity has its roots in Africa, and I'm not here to debate, dispute, or argue about that. But over thousands of years, we have adapted, evolved, mixed, and created our own distinct identities. Again, over a millennia, people's DNA adapts to the environment. What once looked one way can evolve into something entirely different. And humans have always exchanged DNA, mixing and sharing across lands and cultures, evolving into unique peoples with distinct languages, traditions, and ways of life. But perhaps the greatest harm comes from within. When indigenous people deny their own kin the right to exist because they don't look the same. Eastern Woodlands people don't look like the Plains people, and why would they? Our histories are different. Our lands are different. The East Coast was ground zero for the colonial invasion. In places like Florida, the Carolinas, Virginia, and the Northeast, our ancestors mixed with many people from many different cultures and backgrounds as a means of survival. This is well documented, and not just by European sources either, but by our own family historians who know the stories and who know the truth. If you don't know the history of my people, don't speak on it. I don't claim to speak for those west of the Mississippi or for our relatives in Central or South America, because that's not my history. That's not my story. If we all focused on understanding our own families, we wouldn't have time to tear down someone else's families or someone else's histories or hating on how someone else looks. When one indigenous person dismisses another based on colorism or any other divisive standard, they are committing an act of cultural genocide. My people were called Cape Fear Indians by Europeans, but we are Oklahomans, the original people. Our appearance, our history is unique to this land, to this region. Yet some want to claim my Cape Fear ancestors to promote a narrative that everyone was black, quoting the 1828 Oxford Dictionary to argue for the blackness or copper-coloredness skin, and that is dangerous and is reductive. It discredits real scholarship and it weakens our collective understanding. The truth is, most of us carry DNA from many places: Mesoamerica, Scotland, Ireland, Africa, and Asia. Just in case you didn't hear that, let me repeat. Most of us carry DNA from many places: Mesoamerica, Scottish, Irish, the Sephardics of Spain, African, Austronesian, Asian. So full blood, it doesn't exist in our histories. It's a fantasy created by colonizers. Full blood, it doesn't exist. It never has. It's a colonial fantasy meant to keep us divided. In the end, my ancestors are with me. They see this division and they are disgusted by it. They demand that I speak out, and they demand that you speak out. I will, no matter who gets offended. Their love and strength are more powerful than any colonial ideology. That's the only approval I need.
Let's say it's 25 years. Every generation is 25 years. If I took you back 20 generations, it took 1,048,576 human beings to bring you into existence today. each and every one of us, as 1,048,576 human beings. And we think we're alone. Our ancestors. You walk with your ancestors. You eat with your ancestors. All you got to do is recognize them. They're talking to you all the time. This society got you thinking you insane when you listen to those voices.
Right. That's that ancestral time.
That's what it is, constantly. See, they cannot, at one time in their living is one thing, but now that they are in the next realm, they cannot see with their eyes. They cannot smell with their nose. They cannot have the senses that we have, but they live through us. They see the world through our eyes, through our ears, nose, tongue, skin, mind. They are in a realm that knows better on a spiritual level that we have yet to conquer on the physical level. So when you listen to your ancestors talking to you, then they can tell you things that you don't know. And then they can celebrate life through you. It's a symbiotic relationship.
The spirit of our ancestors is in our songs, is in our drum beat. Each step we take during dance. It's in our truths as we combat and counter colorism and racism. It's in our tongue when we speak our language. It's in our family names as they're passed down, and our bloodlines. It's in our resilience and resolve. It's in our will to exist, to live, and to be free. It's in our seeds, our crops, our water, our land, and our air. The spirit of my ancestors is like my aura. It surrounds and protects me. So when we look eye to eye, it's my ancestors who are looking back at you. We're one. On est Disney Goa, Okaisneriste.